cultures, the breath is something that connects us with the external world, the air, our body, the lung, then the psyche and spirit. So chi has, and ki in Japan have all those meanings, the same in, prana, of course, ruach in the Hindu tradition, pneuma, those are actually in Hawaii, ha means the same, air, and the cosmic creative principle. Aloha is very famous, means the presence of the living spirit and the breath. And the opposite, aoli, which they used for foreigners since the time that Cook, landed. Yeah. They used the term haoli for white people, which means no breath.
No breath, haoli.
Without breath.
Yeah.
It's not that they don't breathe, but they don't have the
real breath.
Yeah.
Because there is also the notion in Taoist, which is called pneuma breath, jinqi, which means, I would say, energized, or just energized, because jin, which means at the same time sperm and semen as such, and basically this is a matter of sensation, matter, just sublime matter of sensation. So just when breath is energized by the spirit. So when you have all those phenomena in spirit, isn't it so? So just from this point of view, you are being, an ear, all those mystic traditions, and you just focused it in one, in one very profound technique. So could you say several words from this point of view, what you are really doing?
Are you specifically talking about holotropic breathwork?
Yes.
Yeah, because for me that whole area opened when I volunteered for a psychedelic session. So my first entry into this realm was chemical, but then we developed holotropic breathwork as an alternative, non-drug alternative to some of the things that we experienced and saw in these psychedelic sessions, which of course again is a sacred tradition, because there are many cultures that use plants as means of ritual, spiritual life. In Mesoamerica they talk about the flesh of gods, mushrooms.
Because basically all substances changes your breathing, changes your state of consciousness only through changing your breathing patterns.
Yes.
So just then, that China, the usage of tea is again change of breathing. And tea also just makes really in Chinese civilization a very important point, just creating a different type of breath, because as far as I can see, the main difference between East and West is attitude to what's breathe. Because for it's been, I would say, sixth feeling, just sixth sense in Chinese tradition, breathe. Because breathing which unifies inner and outer world, and just being a measure of the spiritual balance.
What is interesting in the West is that, as I mentioned, the breath became just a physiological function, but also the symptoms which are produced by faster breathing are all pathologized. So there is about maybe 10 to 15% of the Western population, people who start breathing faster spontaneously. It's called hyperventilation syndrome, and it is seen as a pathological process. So they would get an injection of calcium, they would get a Valium, they would get a bag over the mouth to increase the carbon dioxide, and the doctors are not happy until it's over. Whereas we do the opposite. We encourage the faster breathing, like in many of the spiritual systems where you work with breath. And I would see the hyperventilation syndrome, so-called, as an effort of the organism to heal itself. You see, process starts.
Absolutely.
But it's misunderstood as pathology.
But it makes main difference between Eastern, I mean Chinese,
Yes.
and Western medicine. You know, just as a system of knowledge, as ontological, you know, just and not theological approach, you know, because in Chinese medicines and in all approach to life, you know, once you encounter with some problem, this is the chance given by spirit or God or heaven for you just to make a progress. And here you see an opposite effect. Once you encounter the problem, it's not that God is teaching you and Allah Akbar, but it's just you should try just to mend it, just not to use the energy which is given. So it was, of course, it was a sort of genius decision, you know. And what's your relation with Eastern practices or, you know, cultures? Just what was influence, you know?
Well, I became fascinated by Eastern philosophies when my mother took me, I was about 13 years old, into a meeting with Paul Brunton. I don't know if you know.
I don't know.
He was a writer and philosopher who became like an interpreter of Eastern religions for Western audiences. He spent a lot of time with Sri Ramana Maharshi on Arunachala and some other masters, and also in Egypt. So he wrote books like Hermit in the Himalayas, you know, secret teachings behind yoga, and about the Egyptian mysteries and so on. And he had disciples all over the world, and he traveled, and people met, and had a little meditation, and he would give a darshan. And so my mother became very interested in this, and she took me there as a 13-year-old. And they had Aurobindo, you know, they had Sri Ramana Maharshi, they had Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore, and I was intellectually very, very interested. So I sort of was devouring that literature, but they were also meditating, and I just couldn't meditate. You know, boring, yeah, boring. You know, with so many interesting things to do. Who wants to sit? And so it wasn't until after my psychedelic sessions where meditation became very natural. But before I was just too much in the world. So as I was studying medicine, I also took on Sanskrit for a couple of years. Sanskrit, yeah. So that was my intellectual sort of approach. And I loved, you know, Hindu mythology and Buddhist mythology, but I had complete misconception. I thought these people, you know, in India, they don't have any work, they don't have anything to do, so they sit on the Ganges and they sort of make up these stories. Like it's like what our novelists are doing, or when you're writing a book. And then when I started having psychedelic sessions, I mean, the whole mythology came alive. I mean, I you know, encountered Shiva and Kali. I mean, there's powerful presences. I had a death rebirth experience that where the blow came from you know, Shiva Bhairava, the destructive force, and I had the feeling of being totally annihilated, and then sort of having this experience of kind of an Atma Brahma experience, and that just completely transformed my life.
When it was?
This was 56. I was a beginning psychiatrist 56 years ago.
56 years ago.
Yes. I also studied a little Chinese, and that was an interesting story. I read Freud, and Freud was talking about the dream work.
Yes.
And there's a little footnote where he uses actually Chinese as a parallel to the dream work, because dreams work with images, you see, and the pictograms are images. And so I became so interested that I took on Chinese in the Oriental Institute, and we had a brilliant, this was like, you know, this is like 50 years ago, brilliant teacher was Czech, but he knew everything when we were sort of learning the country. He knew all the history about it. You know, this is not just memorizing.
Tell a
but
story
if you have,
about
if you
images.
have east. So the image is, you know, the tree, and you have the sun,
and the sun just,
climbing.
Just under the top of the tree.
Yeah. So in the Chinese mythology, the sun was getting on the sky by climbing a mulberry tree.
It's on the moon, you know, and it's called Fu San Shu, like a world tree, you know, just not the tree.
And you know, then you have the image for a book, and then you have the bamboo stylus, and it's the mouse, you know, what the mouse said is written. So so we had these kinds of images. So I still remember, you know, many of the Chinese pictograms, radicals, and the way they are put together. But he was Czech, and you cannot speak Chinese with an accent because you have these 4 different and unless
tones.
You know, I mean, you can butcher English, the French accent, and you know, Texas accent, but if you don't get it accurately in the Chinese language,
nobody understands.
So nobody understood me, but I was able to.
I know it very well.
I was able to write write the signs.
And I would like to ask, you know, because my main of interest is Book of Changes. Do you have any idea?
Doing it and I became fascinated by it was one of the major examples of synchronicity. You really get an answer, you know, that is very appropriate for what you are asking.
And
but I have not got as deep into it as, for example, Terence McKenna.
I see.
You know,
I know.
Yeah. So he spent much more time with the teaching than I did. But,
because one of the main conception of time in China, which you know has very sophisticated calendar, you know, and all systems of prediction are based on this sophisticated calendar notion and philosophy, which gives you an opportunity to describe the world as all phases of breathing at the same time. And Qi is also being main matter of time, you know, and even weather in Chinese, it is called Tianqi, which means heavenly breathing. And energy of earth is called Diqi, which is earthly breathing, or your earthly breath. And so what's your conception of time? Well, what do you think now about time? Because just one more word, because in China, time, what's made difference, it's not abstract notion. It's that what's imbibed, you know, to just penetrate everything and make quality of the life, it's time.
Well, the main notion of time you get is that linear time is just one sort of way of seeing time. With illusion, you can have an experience where you get beyond linear time when everything coexists actually at the same time. But what is most interesting for me is that I see now time as having a quality. Not just quantity. I mean, each moment is loaded with meaning. The last 30 years I've been interested in astrology with Rick Tarnasum. Really, you know, the cosmos and psyche. So we found out that you can actually predict the archetypally the content of experiences in these holotropic states if you use transit astrology. And so in that sense, when you are born, I mean, that moment, that time is loaded with meaning. It's not like 1 minute is the same as another minute.
Absolutely. Charged.
Yeah, so that was a great discovery for me personally, that time is not just something that measures, you know, quantitatively.
Not only figures, not only numerals.
not only numbers.
Yeah.
It has a deep qualitative properties. And Jung
yes, of course.
became interested in astrology, and he was comparing it to wine.
Mm-hmm.
The wine, that grows not only in a certain place, but at a certain time, has a very specific quality that carries somehow
every
that
year
moment.
and every moment is different.
Yeah.
Just and it depends. So here we come to the point of action meaning. What is an action in time? Because to my mind, it's very difficult to understand all what's happening now on the planet, because we lost this feeling, capability to feel the quality of time. I mean, as a very accurate feeling.
You see, I had also the experience of time, which is very tantric, when you have this tantric image of this open mouth, and the present moment is being spilled out, and that's the only reality. The past is just a quality of the added to the present moment. So it's like the present moment is constantly sort of emerging, and the whole history is just contained in that moment. So I had that experience. There's a tantric image for that. The mouth.
I see, right, spilling out.
Just the present moment, kind of filled with all of existence, is kind of, coming into manifestation. Something that you would be interested in. We had Christina and I were running International Transpersonal Conference. That was the one that was here with a continuation. It was in Moscow.
Yes, I know.
And we had one in Kyoto. And as we were doing it, there were some negotiations between American and Japanese businessmen. They had some problems. And there was a Japanese man who was a Jungian, who spent some time in Switzerland, in the Jung Institute and so on. So he was a Jungian, and he was watching them and he was laughing. He said they think because they have a translator that they understand each other. But they don't, because the Western thinking and the Eastern thinking is based on completely different premises. He said, the Western idea is the power center is in the middle, and then you have hierarchy, higher animals, lower animals, and sort of angels and so on. Whereas in the East, the creation emerges out of the void as a complete, the complete creation.
Wholeness.
Yeah. And so he says it would be like Newtonian and Einsteinian physicists talking, and they would be using terms like matter, time, energy, but it would not be the same. They would have a different kind of concept behind it. So he said you would need a translator who would say, now when they say matter, this is what they mean. When this group says matter, it's really different. You understand?
I understand it
So
very, very clearly.
Yeah, different thinking. He said you have the universe where the power source is in the middle. We have a universe where it comes out of
everywhere,
cosmic void and nothingness that emerges. And there might be sort of seeming hierarchies, but ultimately the worm is as important as the king. They're all integral part of the whole. Everything sort of interconnected.
And again, just when I've been communicating to Jose Arguelles, you know him. He's Jose Arguelles. It's about Mayan factor, just about the doomsday in 2012.
Tell me the name once more.
Jose Arguelles.
Arguelles. Yeah, Jose is the one who did the harmonic.
Yes, convergence.
Convergence,
Yes,
he was the friend who brought the attention to the Mayan.
To Mayan prophecy,
yeah.
which tells that this year the time should end, just that humanity should enter into a new cycle,
I have great interest in it. I wrote a paper about it.
And it's the same. It's very similar because there are some theories, just and quite evident, just from China, that all this Mayan culture, from the point of view of calendrical knowledge, and is derived from Chinese. They say that some Chinese tribes just went maybe 7,000 BC, just into America.
And Joseph Campbell was actually the mythologist was showing some parallels between art in China and Mesoamerican art.
And again, the main similarity is calendar sophisticatedness. Calendar sophisticatedness. But the difference is that there is no any notions about the doomsday this year, just in Chinese calendar, which is being taught there. But anyway, this is again about breathe. Well, when we say about breathe, there is some breath in which you are being a director, just a manager, just from your inner self, and there is a breathing which is breathing you. So what do you think from this point of view? Once you are getting in holotrophic session, what entity you let to breathe through you?
Well, we have. I'm a clinical psychiatrist by training.
I understand.
Something different now. I don't know what I would be called, but that's where I started. And so people are coming with problems, phobias, depressions, and so on. And if you look at the Western schools, we have a whole range of schools, and each gives you a different story about what are the most powerful motivating forces in the psyche, why do you have symptoms, what the symptoms mean, and then everybody comes with a different technique. You're going to fix people. Now, what happens in these holotropic states is very different. When you get into that state, then you connect to what we call the inner healer. There's an inner healing intelligence that comes in, and we just support what is happening, even if at times we don't understand. We trust. You see that there's a healing force which has greater intelligence that we can come up with on the basis of what we learned at school or books we read. So it's in a sense similar to what in Kundalini yoga would be, Kundalini or prana, or with the Kalahari Bushmen call it Tum, and they do the dance and the drumming, and then suddenly energy comes that starts healing, and they just sort of trust it and they cooperate with it and let it do its job. Mana in the Polynesian tradition, very similar for the Kapunas and so on. So the cosmic, it's a cosmic force. That's beyond anything that you can offer as a psychiatrist.
So this energy is coming from inside.
Yes, different people do it in different ways.
Because in Chinese Qigong, because Qigong is quite late term, because basically it was Taoist teaching inner exercises like this, Neigun, inner exercises. You exercise your inside. And there they say that there is this matter of sensation, bodily sensation, matter of breath, and matter of spirit or consciousness. And so what you do, you first begin to exercise the matter of sensation or matter of your body, sublime it into a breath. Then you begin to exercise your matter of breath, subliming it, reworking it into a matter of spirit. consciousness. Then you begin to exercise the matter of spirits, and all this through breathing process. All this different type of breathing, deep, just all of them. Then you are exercising a matter of spirit, sublime it into void, shunyata. Then you exercise the matter of void, just united with the way. It's 5 stages, it's been classic, So just from this point of view, it comes to my mind that once you develop your practices, of course you should use many different type of breathing, because as far as they can feel, at least once you are able, which is quite difficult for Western orientated body, just to breathe constantly, slowly, for quite long period of time, just slowing down. You again must have very different experiences. What do you think about
well, this, each of those techniques have their effects. I mean, you have the Taoist...
any breathing
effect. You have the one of the type of the breathings where you actually get a feather. You have to breathe so that it doesn't move. It's like more like getting it with osmosis. Or the Essenes were saying, you breathe and you focus on the space between the inhalation and the exhalation. There is the entry into the transcendental. And you certainly can get, results with pranayama, forceful breathing. But we found out that people can get powerful effects without having any specific instructions, that they just get the guidance from within it. The different people at different times will work with the breath differently.
So basically,
and we don't coach people. We don't say now you breathe this way or that way. And it's very humbling also, because powerful things happen sometimes where we are not even looking. We just walk around and suddenly somebody goes through some powerful transformations. Very different from a situation where you think you are the healer, you are the doer, and you take all the credit and, of course, all the blame if it doesn't work. There's a lot of, in our philosophy, there's a lot of emphasis on the inner healer. They were doing it, in temple incubation in Greece, where there was a temple of Apollo, and they would spend the night there, and then they get a dream that would actually, they either get healed in the dream, or they would get some kind of idea as to what they should be doing. And the therapeutes, the original name, the therapist, was not the doer, somebody going to fix you. It's somebody who is an assistant who intelligently assists in the healing process, but the healing process is coming from the deities.
Fair. And what would you say 3 main values of human life? Now, what is for you 3 or just 5? Just which are main values? Just.
Well, I would say, love of creation, certainly. A sense of connectedness, a sense of being connected with other people, being connected with nature, being connected with cosmos, certainly respect for life. I would give, sense of adventure, being incarnate, being part of this phenomenal fact of existence. And then, anything that you do against avidya, that pursue the prajaparamita, not living just sort of in the material world,
And
being involved in some kind of a process of self-discovery that leads to the prajnaparamita, discovering who you are, what it is about.
so what's your relation to religion?
Well, the transpersonal psychology is really an effort to bring together spirituality and science. We are not that interested in religions. This is more like history, you know. The sort of respect for the spiritual dimension as a vital dimension of the psyche, of the universal scheme of things, respect for people who pursue that, but I wouldn't have any commitment whether the path that they choose is Christian or Muslim, you know, Sufi or you know, shamanic or whatever. I see those as just various different ways to the same. But I think the problem begins when you have a group of people who start relating to the archetypes of a particular religion. Joseph Campbell said a useful deity has to be transparent for the transcendent. You see it as something that's pointing to the absolute, to the source out of which everything comes, but you don't make it opaque and you worship the image. Because then what happens, and that's where organized religions come, then you can have a situation where you have people who worship in a particular way, you know, particular kind of images, but automatically set that group against another one. And then you have we are Christians and you are pagans, you're all pagans. And we are going to convert you to our belief, or there's no place for you. You know, we are Muslims, you are infidels, we are Jews, you are goyim. So that becomes a very dangerous phenomenon, something that contributes to the problems we have. Even differences within the same religion are enough to kill. Protestants, Catholics, you know, Sunnis, Shiites. So I have respect for a religion that honors direct experience, not a religion where they invite you and then somebody is going to be telling you about experiences that other people had. I believe in a religion that would create context for you and give you means for you to have personal experiences. Like Buddha said, don't believe anything that I say until your personal experience confirms that. So religion for me is something that should bind together, religar. And unfortunately many of the organized religions, although they came from spiritual sources, the founders had spiritual experiences, the apostles or the prophets and so on. But very frequently when the religion becomes organized, that spiritual element tends to disappear and they become concerned about money, property, secular power and so on. And they can completely lose the connection. They become concerned about things that are trivial. In the Christian religion, problems in a world which is overpopulated, where we have AIDS epidemics, they are concerned about people not using contraception. Once you get into those kinds of things, I don't have a lot of respect for those religions. I have respect for people who did some kind of inner, deep inner exploration. Whatever they believe is really confirmed by their own experience, not just some dogma that somebody is presenting. For example, in Christianity for the first 400 years there was a concept of reincarnation. Then there was a council in Constantinople which was against Father Origen, political thing, and they say, if you believe in this terrible soul, you're anathema, you're banned out of our, but the existence of past life experience is very, very powerful. We see it all the time, and many different religions and spiritual systems really incorporate it. And I had many powerful experiences of reincarnations. So if I have a religion that tells me it's nothing like reincarnation, I have a different perspective because of my personal experience. So we are interested in spirituality, really. Spiritual experiences. There's nothing unscientific in studying these holotropic states and the phenomenology, the impact which they have on human life. Does not compete for the same territory as science. Heaven in religion is not the astronomical heaven. This is something that you experienced in a non-ordinary state. The same hell is not something that you would be looking for. Hell is a state of consciousness. So we are interested in spiritual experiences. And if you have spiritual experiences, you might understand where religions are coming from, but you also might understand where they went astray.
Right.
Like
where they lived.
Like the original message of Jesus was very different to what happened with Christianity.
Absolutely.
The Inquisition and the Crusades and what you see in the United States, the fundamentalists and so on.
All those stories which exist now.
So, I'm interested in religions to the extent to which they are really close to the kind of original message that's based on real personal experience. When you get all the attritions, everything that happened historically, all the distortions that involve battles, and I'm just not particularly interested.
I see, right.
This is history. This for me is not
very
spiritual.
interesting, very similar approach. And just maybe my last question: what do you think about the future ways of human being development? Just where it goes, just where it will be, whether it will be a spiritual way of life or technological, just like all it will be the nature. What's going to be a transition which you envisage, which you perceive, or just what real radical changes can happen in our history?
I don't know. I have experienced alternatives. There is one. That's what I'm absolutely sure about is that we are at a fundamental intersection. When is the question whether our species will move to another level of consciousness? It's almost becoming a different species. Getting over the violence and the greed that was shaping. Or we might exterminate ourselves. We might destroy ourselves. We might destroy many other species with us. So I think it's a critical period. And in that sense, I'm interested in the fact that the Mayan calendar is ending.
End of time.
Although I believe that what was meant was hopefully end of an era governed by greed and violence and so on, and moving to another age rather than end. Apocalypse also is the revelation. Certain secret things are revealed to people. So I believe that we are on this really important, critical crossroads now, and you can see both of the scenarios unfolding. We are destroying the planet. What happened in the Gulf, Mexican Gulf, the spills and all this, and the nuclear accidents and so on. So that, and I also see a number of people awakening, and becoming like a different species. I've seen many people who have done significant work on themselves. They would like to be called global citizens, not Americans or Czechs. you know, this is like Buckminster Fuller talks about this being planet, being a spaceship, Earth. The people who have done this kind of significant work, they don't see violence as an acceptable form of solving problems. They see that our high priority should be protection of life and protection of environment for life. We are biological creatures, and our primary concern is clean water, clean air, clean earth, which is feeling suicidal, to do things that creates environment that's hostile to life. So that's one aspect that I'm convinced that we are in some kind of a critical situation, that we change into something else, or we are really going to have trouble, Now, there are, in the spiritual world, there are scenarios, and I had glimpses of both of them. Aurobindo, the idea that the spiritual will sort of come into the world and everything gets spiritualized, the material world gets spiritualized. But you have also in the Hindu mythology, you have the concept of yugas. The universe is created and it's building up and then goes to a really, really bad end and collapses, and then another creation happens. Both you find in sophisticated spiritual literature those possibilities. So I believe that the universe is ultimately lila, it's a divine play, and
play is a very important notion.
Yeah, and it's. I think it's ultimately impossible to reach certainty. This is how things are, because there's always going to be some phenomenal surprise.
It's very difficult to translate Russian word igra, because it's not equal to play. How it's in Czech?
Hra. Yeah,
I think this notion in Slavic languages is deeper than Anglo-Saxon. Play or game, which is just play, game, fun. You have several notions which really give you a full description of this igra.
Yeah, game is more like something that has rules, like football. It's a game. Play is more like you entertain yourself to be closer to the lila. Cosmic play, cosmic game.
Because in Russian, it was when they sing a song, заиграть песню. Играть песню, играть танец, пляску. And it's different. So I'm always in a little bit of difficulty just trying to find the translation of the Russian word игра, because I consider it very, very crucial notion, which only one can change the world.
Yeah. People who do this kind of work, psychedelics, breath work and so on, they have great difficulties describing what happened. It's many of those it's ineffable. But even sort of describing certain experiences that they had, and those that are sophisticated frequently go to languages of cultures that had sophistication in terms of self-exploration.
I don't have the term in Chinese. In Chinese it's not enough. I see that Slavic is good. Igra is very good. It's very good. It's perfect. But all those, which I know, I don't know which is in Sanskrit, lila. It means maybe lila.
Some of these people use actually the terms from Sanskrit or from Japanese. Samadhi, and Kensho, and Satori, and Maya, Lila, and you have sort of nuances in Sanskrit. You have Nirvikalpa Samadhi, Savikalpa Samadhi. You see the divine in a certain form or without form, and all those things have very specific meaning. Whereas when we use terms like cosmic illusion or something, it doesn't quite capture it, because it means
absolutely.
They have specific
Because
terminology.
in Slavic, you know, ra at the same time means false and truth. At the same time, it's a mixture, you know.
Yeah.
Just when you use false and true, you know, just put it together and just manipulating those two parts of this universe.
So what do you think? What's this going to happen?
To humanity. I'm just a little bit haunted with the idea that I should play some game here, you know. It may happen anything. For me, the question is, what do I want? What do I want with humanity to happen? And so, just because I've been studying a lot of Chinese medicine. I mean, again, a notion and structure of Chinese medicine. How you know the body is ill, and how you heal, and how you should think, what mental, what spiritual process must be in you. So just, I can see that this outer body of the world, which is quite diseased, you know, just at the moment, but at the same time, at the beginning of our conversation, we said that disease only gives you a cue, you know, just where to go. So just now, I am very much concentrated in order to understand the whole diagnosis of the story which we call humanity in the universe. And so just I myself, you know, I make my research mostly in Chinese whole body of knowledge in order to translate it into this Western, which is being basically Aramic, you know, just from Abrahamic religions coming, you know, here, because we are being the mixture of all those, you know, as a text representation. So just I'm now trying with all my effort just to put this Chinese way of seeing what is disease, what is pathology, you know, how you cure it, you know, just on the basis of knowledge. So I say it does not matter what's gonna be. From the point of view of Chinese cyclistic science, the big cycle is 26,690,040 years, and we are now just somewhere in the first part. It's 10,155,027 years from the beginning. So we have plenty of time yet for playing games, you know.
But you know, my own approach is I know what I would like the world to be, and trying to do what we can within our own range. I believe that when people go through this transformation, that they are becoming better people. We have a better chance for survival, and I want to, you know, make my own contribution to that. They once